Yang Yi had naturally given many things consideration when he decided to let Snowy and Arya go. Firstly, Yang Lianshuang was a little weak, so he was worried about letting her make the trip alone. If he sent her there, that would be all right. However, he was the focus of countless powers, so if he returned with her, it may bring calamity to her home world. Secondly, he was planning to travel to Eternal Kingdom, and his goal was firstly to retrieve Sword Scroll's main body. Sword Scroll had helped him so much, and she needed help now. She naturally wouldn't refuse. Secondly, he wanted to take a look at Eternal Kingdom, especially their strength. He still knew nothing about Eternal Kingdom right now. Besides that, his trip was a dangerous one, so leaving them behind was a good thing for them. Because even if anything happened to him, they would be safe. He treated it as giving them a vacation. Arya and Snowy returned to the primordial pagoda. The two little fellows naturally planned to bid farewell to the others. Only Yang Yi and Yang Lianshuang remained in the hall. She spoke softly. "You're worried." Yang Yi nodded. Suddenly, a Nanjing appeared by his side. He gazed at her and she said, "I'll go with them." Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and agreed. All right. He could rest at ease with her going along. Obviously, Nanjing was a little worried about those two little demons, Arya and Snowy, going with Yang Lianshuang. Firstly, those two little fellows were quite lawless, and Yang Lianshuang couldn't keep them in check at all. Secondly, she was worried about their safety and afraid they would do something bad. Yang Lianshuang smiled. "Your presence is naturally for the best." Yang Yi was about to say something when they looked up into the air. A powerful wave of pressure was pressing down from above. Yang Lianshuang said, "It's probably the Origin Sky Sect." Yang Yi frowned. They walked out of the hall while a Nanjing returned into the pagoda. In the sky above the city, a middle-aged man in a silver robe was floating there. Based on the aura he emanated, he was a four-world realm expert. Besides that, there was an old man behind him, and the old man was a three-world realm expert. Yang Yi and Yang Lianshuang appeared before the middle-aged man, and the latter glanced at them before looking at Yang Yi. "You are?" Yang Yi asked. "Are you subordinates of the desolate race?" The middle-aged man nodded. "Yes." Yang Yi nodded. "Go on. This city is under my protection, so don't disturb it again." The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed slightly. "Aren't you a little too confident?" Yang Yi glanced at him. "I'll give Huanging face and ask you one last time, are you going to leave or not?" The middle-aged man spoke solemnly. "You know Huanging?" Yang Yi replied. "He's a friend of mine." "Right, I'm Yang Yi. Have you heard of me?" "Yang Yi." The middle-aged man shook his head. "I haven't." Yang Yi was quite embarrassed. He glanced at Yang Lianshuang and smiled embarrassedly. "This world isn't well informed. It has nothing to do with me." Suddenly, the middle-aged man said, "No matter who you are, since you dared to interfere in my Origin Sky Sect's business, then—" A sword howl resounded abruptly, and then the middle-aged man's voice stopped. A moment later, his head fell off his neck while blood sprayed out like a fountain. The old man was stunned, but it didn't take him long to recover from his shock. He glanced at Yang Yi and vanished into the sky. Yang Lianshuang asked, "Aren't you going to kill him?" Yang Yi shook his head. "They won't let this go. So, let's wait for someone who can make the decisions. I can't be bothered to go looking for them." She nodded in response. Yang Yi asked, "When do you plan to leave?" Yang Lianshuang thought for a moment and replied, "Any time." Yang Yi nodded. "I'm going to see those two little fellows." Yang Yi went back into the primordial pagoda. At this moment, Snowy and Arya had bade farewell to all the demons. The demon beasts were unwilling to see them go. They were truly unwilling because while Arya always trained them, they couldn't get used to her suddenly leaving. As for Snowy, it was worse. Could be said that, in the beginning, they had only been willing to stay here because of Snowy. Now that Snowy was leaving, they were naturally extremely reluctant. Luckily, it was just for some time. Snowy raised her paw to tell them it was the amount of time she was going. However, no demon knew how long that represented. 5 days? 5 months? 5 years? Of course, even if it was 50 years, it was a very, very short amount of time for them. Yang Yi summoned Area and Snowy, and he shook his head and smiled when he saw the excitement on their faces. They were really like children. Yang Yi restrained his smile and spoke seriously. Don't cause trouble, understand? They hurriedly nodded. At this moment, they would agree to anything Yang Yi said. In the end, Yang Yi told them a lot and they agreed to everything. Actually, Yang Yi wasn't very worried. After all, and Nanjing would be going with them, so there would be no need to worry about their safety. Because Area's strength was extremely terrifying too. When she left the pagoda, Snowy intentionally showed the trees with spirit energy. This time, she buried over a dozen world crystals beneath them. Besides that, she told the primordial pagoda to give them primordial violet energy while she was away. Once she did all of that, Snowy, Area, and Nanjing left the primordial pagoda with Yang Yi. On the ascension platform, all the demons sent Snowy and Area off. Outside the hall, an old man had arrived there, Elder Yuan. Yang Yi smiled. Long time no see. The old man glanced at Yang Yi, shook his head, and smiled. Your strength is unfathomable now. Yang Yi smiled. You've improved very quickly too. You're a 2-world realm expert already. Elder Yuan shook his head. I'm just dragging out my existence. I know my own potential, and the 3-world realm or perhaps 4-world realm is my limit. But your future is limitless. He hesitated for a moment and asked, Are you going to Eternal Kingdom? Yang Yi nodded. Elder Yuan spoke solemnly. I've investigated Eternal Border, the Desolate Race, and Eternal Kingdom, so I know a little. Going now is probably quite dangerous for you. Yang Yi smiled. I won't go there openly. I plan to sneak in there. Elder Yuan hesitated for a moment and nodded. All right, as long as you're aware of the dangers. Meanwhile, the others suddenly looked outside the hall, and a voice came from there. I'm the Vice Commander of the Desolate Race. I would like to request an audience with young Master Yang. The Desolate Race. Yang Yi walked out, and he saw a middle-aged man in black armor not too far away. The man bowed slightly to Yang Yi. Young Master Yang. Yang Yi asked, What's going on with the Origin Sky Sect? The man replied, They are a subordinate power of my desolate race. We weren't aware that this country is a power you established. This is a misunderstanding, and I hope you forgive us for any offense. Yang Yi shook his head. It's nothing serious. This small city isn't of any help to the desolate race or eternal kingdom. So, just let it stay neutral, all right? The man hurriedly replied, Of course. This city will be under my desolate race's protection from now on, and if necessary, you just have to send someone to notify the Origin Sky Sect if you need anything. Yang Yi nodded. Thank you. The man bowed slightly to Yang Yi. Farewell. He vanished into the distance once he finished speaking. Meanwhile, Yang Lianshuang said, They really give you a lot of face, huh? Yang Yi replied, I'm friends with their crown prince. Anyway, let's get back to the important matters at hand. Have you made arrangements for the city? She nodded. I've practically done everything, and it'll be fine with Elder Yuan here. No chaos will arise in the city. The main issue is the desolate race and eternal kingdom. If they enter into a war with each other, we will probably suffer because of it. However, I can rest at ease now that I've witnessed your influence. She gazed at Area and Snowy and she continued, As for you 2 little fellows, you better be obedient. Understand? Be obedient. They hurriedly nodded. They would agree to anything right now. Yang Lianshuang grinned and gazed at Yang Yi. You take care too, especially about your terrible temper. Try to change it appropriately. Especially in Eternal Kingdom, try to keep a low profile as much as possible. Yang Yi smiled. I will. Big brother Yang. Suddenly, Area said, Snowy and I are going to enjoy ourselves for a few days, and we'll return once we're done. So, stay alive so we can see you again. Snowy and I would be very sad if we don't see you again. But don't worry, we will avenge you. Yang Yi knocked her on the head. Don't say such things. She cracked a smile and showed him her tongue. Snowy flew over to Yang Yi, hugged him and kissed him before waving her paws swiftly. She was telling him to be careful and take care. A long time passed before Yang Yi rubbed her little head and smiled. Don't worry, I'm very strong, right? Snowy cracked a smile, hugged Yang Yi again, and rubbed her head against his head. Yang Yi gazed at Nanjing. Be careful. She nodded. You too. Meanwhile, Yang Lianshuang formed a strange seal with both hands. In an instant, a huge blue array of light appeared outside the hall. Yang Yi watched as she took a Nanjing, Area, and Snowy along with her as she entered the array of light. Area and Snowy waved at Yang Yi. As Snowy gazed and gazed at Yang Yi, her tears suddenly surged out, and she wanted to go back on her decision. She didn't want to go anymore, but it was a little too late. The formation activated, and Yang Yi watched as all of them vanished. Yang Yi just stared blankly ahead on the spot for a long time. Farewells. It was a truly terrible feeling. Area, Snowy, and a Nanjing had left. Yang Yi felt a little empty. Now, he noticed that he'd been used to their presence. He'd become used to everyone by his side. It was how people usually were. They would only cherish something when they lost it. Luckily, Snowy and Area were only going with a Nanjing and Yang Lianshuang to have some fun. Yang Yi calmed himself and gazed at Elder Yuan. Elder Yuan, I'll leave everything here to you. If it's necessary, you can seek help from the desolate race. Elder Yuan nodded slightly. Just be careful. Yang Yi smiled. You too. Yang Yi didn't stay a while longer and vanished into the sky. In the primordial pagoda, the primal true dragon was the leader of the demon beasts now that Area and Snowy had left. All the demons had a gloomy expression on their faces as they stood on the ascension platform. They were very reluctant to see Area and Snowy leave. They were used to their presence. However, life still had to go on. The dragon suddenly said, Train! Train! All of the others shuddered. At this moment, they recalled what Area had told them. She'd said that the first thing she did upon returning was to spar with them. That wasn't even the most important part. She'd also promised to bury them if they died. It didn't take long for them to leave the primordial pagoda and head toward the lightning. It was very painful, but they had to admit that it was very, very effective. Yang Yi and Area weren't the only ones who'd benefited tremendously. They too had received huge benefits. It could be said that they far surpassed demon beasts in their realm of cultivation. They were a group of great demons with extremely terrifying combat strengths. Moreover, they were growing stronger and stronger. Yang Yi didn't head straight for Eternal River. He went to Eternal Border instead. In a spot in space at Eternal Border, Yang Yi arrived before a pitch-black palace. There were 3 characters at the top of it. Guardians. Practically everyone in Eternal Border who'd hunted him down had been annihilated. However, there was one power left, the Guardians. He naturally wouldn't forget them. Yang Yi went to the palace, but it was empty. Yang Yi scanned it with his divine sense, but he sensed no signs of life. They were gone. Yang Yi glanced at the palace and swung his sword. Hiss! The black palace was instantly sliced into bits by countless rays of sword energy. Yang Yi turned around and left. Around an hour later, Yang Yi arrived beneath the ground of the Northern Sword Sect. Chun Xuanan asked, Are you heading to Eternal Kingdom? Yang Yi nodded. Chun Xuanan nodded slightly. It's good to gain some experience and see it for yourself. The civilization in the martial Dao there is the greatest in the universe right now. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and asked, Senior, people always say the civilization in the martial Dao, so are there no others like the mortal Dao? Or perhaps the spirit Dao or physical Dao? Chun Xuanan smiled. What are you trying to say? Yang Yi replied, I came to see you because I wanted to seek your guidance about something. In my opinion, the longer people live, the greater their fear is of death and the greater their ambition is. Because as far as they are concerned, nothing else is necessary besides life, and they can abandon everything else. Nothing is more important than the grand Tao of eternal life. Everything is but an ant before eternal life, and that is what many people think. Chun Xuanan replied, Is that wrong? Everyone has their own selfish desires. If you have 10,000 immortal crystals now, you'll want 20,000 a while later. After that, you'll seek 100,000. The desires and ambitions of man are endless. Once they have something nice, they seek something better. That is how the heart of man works, and strictly speaking, it isn't wrong. Yang Yi fell silent. Desire and ambition. Who could escape all of that? Chun Xuanan continued. I understand what you're trying to say. You think that our world is too cruel because only the strong are respected. However, you must realize that because everyone is cultivating, the world is cruel due to their endless fight for resources. This fight for resources isn't just limited to our world. It occurs in every single world. I've lived longer, from the ancient times until now, so I've seen much, much more. In conclusion, I can say, it's the survival of the fittest. Yang Yi laughed bitterly and didn't say anything else. Chun Xuanan said, You're a sword cultivator. A sword cultivator who cherishes your emotions and relationships. But yours is but a minor form of it, and not the major form of it. Your sword fights for your loved ones, and that is a form of restraint, a restraint of your own sword Dao. But it's fine, everything must be done slowly, even the sword Dao. Everything requires a process. Finally, let me tell you something. True cultivators and true experts do not disregard the lives of the weak, and they do not seek joy from killing or bullying the weak. If a day comes when you're strong to a certain extent, I hope you'll still be able to stay true to your heart. Yang Yi bowed to Chun Xuanan and left. Once Yang Yi left, Chun Xuanan shook his head and smiled. His heart. It's a kind one in the end. It was why he thought so highly of Yang Yi. If Yang Yi was an absolutely selfish person or one who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, then Chun Xuanan would absolutely not help Yang Yi. Yang Yi was cruel and ruthless, but he wasn't without a heart. Or to be more precise, emotions still remained in his heart. As far as Chun Xuanan was concerned, being cruel and ruthless to one's enemies wasn't wrong. Being kind and benevolent to one's enemies? People who did that never lived for long. Yang Yi left the Northern Sword Sect and arrived at the Eternal River. This time, no demon beast stopped him. After all, many demon beasts had personally witnessed Yang Yi and Arya subdue the primal royal crocodile and go all the way through the Eternal River. That mysterious little girl was someone that every one of the demon beasts here feared. Yang Yi smoothly arrived before the universe wall, and he withdrew the universe seal as he gazed at it. Yang Yi issued a command in his heart, and the seal shook. A short while later, the seal pressed against the wall, and then the wall gradually split apart at the center. Once it was split open, a strand of extremely powerful spirit energy surged out from the other side. It was spirit energy that was purer than the spirit energy in Eternal Border. The entire Eternal River started to roil. The demon beasts here sensed the aura of Eternal Kingdom. Yang Yi walked in, and the wall closed, causing countless demon beasts throughout Eternal River to roar. Not too far away from the universe wall, a woman was standing there silently. It was Nanli Meng. Nanli Meng gazed at the wall for a long time. Suddenly, she looked to the side, and a black-clothed man soundlessly appeared there. The black-clothed man bowed respectfully to her. Miss Meng, both Eternal Kingdom and the Desolate Race have come to us. Now we must make a choice. Master asked me to seek your opinion. Nanli Meng replied indifferently. What does he think? The black-clothed man shook his head. I do not know. I'm only in charge of passing his message. Nanli Meng fell silent for a short while and asked, Are we unable to delay longer? The black-clothed man replied solemnly, I'm afraid that's impossible. Both of them have lost their patience. If we try to delay, we'll offend both sides, and that is worse. Nanli Meng fell silent for a long time before she asked, What's their attitude toward Eternal Border? The black-clothed man hesitated for a moment and said, Eternal Border will be the new battlefield, because both of them will not fight in their own territory unless it's the final moment to decide the outcome of the entire war. In other words, Eternal Border will cease to exist after the war. Eternal Border was lucky to survive all those years ago because of the sprite progenitor, but the current sprite progenitor. He was quite speechless at this point. According to his investigations, the sprite progenitor was nothing more than a cute pet now. Could she save the world? That was impossible. Yang Yi was her world, and she would only save Yang Yi. But Yang Yi had no ties to Eternal Border, So ask him to save Eternal Border? That was even more impossible. It was good enough that he wasn't destroying it himself. So, as far as the black-clothed man was concerned, Eternal Border was finished. Nanli Meng nodded. I understand. Tell him not to side with any of them. We are nothing but cannon fodder to both of them. Even if there's a way out of it, it'll be a path made of blood. The black-clothed man laughed bitterly. Miss Meng, we have no other choice. We can't afford to offend Eternal Kingdom of the Desolate Race. They will never allow a power like ours to stay neutral at a time like this either. After all, they don't want us to reap the rewards instead. So, we must choose even if we don't want to. Nanli Meng glanced at him. If we can't afford to offend them, can't we hide from them? The man hesitated for a moment and asked, Where will we hide? Nanli Meng replied, The origin world, Wuxia. Tell him to adopt the right attitude there and do his best to keep a low profile while striving to make them accept all of you there. The black-clothed man hesitated for a moment and said, Is that a power that belongs to Xianxia? She nodded. If you're able to make them let you stay, then Huang Ying may give Xianxia face and just let us be. Of course, I dare not say for sure if he will do that, but we can try. The black-clothed man thought for a moment and said, Farewell. He vanished on the spot. Nanli Meng glanced at the universe wall. Take care. She vanished on the spot as well. Eternal Kingdom. Once he passed through the universe wall, Xianxia entered a teleportation passageway, and it didn't take him long to enter a boundless world. Around 2 hours later, the world before him finally became normal. It was an expanse of the starry sky. Xianxia was standing among the stars, and the universe wall was behind him. It was a boundless starry sky, and it was deep and mysterious. Xianxia used the sword domain to conceal his aura completely and traveled forward. Meanwhile, he asked, Sword Scroll, can you tell me about this world? A short while passed before Sword Scroll's voice resounded in Xiangxia's mind. Eternal Kingdom has 5 main regions, the East, South, North, West, and Central regions. Every region represents a power. The D-clan used to be the lord of the South region. Unfortunately, they were driven out, and I can only wonder what power has replaced them now. Xianxia nodded slightly. Continue, she continued. Besides the 5 regions, there are other small worlds and mysterious locations. For example, the Sprite World. The Sprite World was where the Sprite progenitor lived. While it's a small place, its status transcends the 5 regions. It's naturally because it is the Sprite progenitor's home. Besides that, there are some other forbidden areas that even I don't know much about. The Sprite World. Xianxia committed the place to memory, and he planned to have a look at it when he could. Because according to the previous Sprite progenitor, that place belonged to Snowy. Since it was Snowy's, it was his. Xianxia asked, Can you sense the fragments of your main body? She replied, Yes. It's at the West region's Ancient Sword Sect. The Ancient Sword Sect? Xianxia nodded. Tell me about it. Sword Scroll said, The Ancient Sword Sect was once one of the top powers in Eternal Kingdom, and it's the only sect of sword cultivators here. However, it suffered terrible losses during the war all those years ago, and I don't know if it has recovered now. Xianxia thought for a moment and said, Sword Scroll, why did you leave and come to Eternal Border? Sword Scroll fell silent for a long time and said, I was a super divine treasure all those years ago too. While my main body was destroyed, my spirit remained. However, the Sprite progenitor perished at that time, so no one could repair me. As far as the Ancient Sword Sect was concerned, it was impossible for me to recover. Thus, they chose to refine me. Refine you? Xianxia frowned. What do you mean? She replied indifferently. They wanted to devour my spirit. If my spirit was devoured, it wouldn't just provide them with a huge amount of knowledge in the Sword Tao, it would increase their strength tremendously. After all, I'm the spirit of a super divine treasure, and the spirit of a sword too. Xianxia shook his head. That's not right, she said. Right or wrong doesn't matter at all. I'm not even a divine treasure now, since it's impossible for me to return to being a super divine treasure. I'm useless to them. No, I still have one use, and it's to be devoured. Xianxia asked, did no one try to stop that from happening? She laughed with ridicule. Stop it? Who would do that? The person who wanted to devour me was my past master, that expert who lost his body to a single slap from the desolate emperor. If his strength hadn't been reduced tremendously because his body had been destroyed, and if I hadn't been vigilant, I would have ceased to exist in this world by now. Xianxia shook his head. He wasn't capable of doing something like that, and now he understood why she was so resentful. Anyone would be resentful when the person they trusted the most betrayed them. Xianxia said, then let's go to the ancient sword sect first. Sword Scroll replied solemnly, you must be careful. While you don't have to fear 5 world realm experts now, your identity is unique. I'm afraid you'll be hunted again if you cause a huge commotion. Xianxia nodded slightly. I know. Xianxia vanished on the spot. The west. Sword Scroll guided Xianxia to the west region, and Xianxia instantly felt dense sword intent and sword energy once he entered the area. Xianxia glanced at the surroundings, and then he shot to Ancient Sword City. Ancient Sword City. The Ancient Sword Sect's subordinate city. Most powers had their own subordinate cities or countries, because every power needed fresh blood to join them, and all of these powers would fight to recruit geniuses. In the past, many powers had fought each other for the sake of human resources, and the outcome was both sides suffered from it. In the end, they made an agreement to foster such resources themselves. Just like that, practically every power had their own subordinate cities or countries, because they were an endless source of geniuses for them. At the entrance to Ancient Sword City, Xianxia glanced at the surroundings and said, it isn't very different from Eternal Border. Sword Scroll said, the difference is huge. Sense the surroundings carefully. The spirit energy and people here are far different from the people on the outside. Of course, there is no difference to you, because you are an extraordinarily monstrous genius, and you have the primordial pagoda and snowy. So, you can't experience the benefits of this place because even the spirit energy in Eternal Kingdom cannot compare to what you possess. So, think of it from a different angle. Xianxia glanced at the ground below, then glanced at the city, and it didn't take long for a solemn expression to gradually appear on his face. It was different indeed. The spirit energy here couldn't compete with his primordial violet energy and eternal energy. But it wasn't that inferior. Moreover, the spirit energy here contained the aura of eternal energy. It wasn't very pure, but it was much better than the spirit energy in Eternal Border. Moreover, the people here seemed much more intelligent than the ordinary cultivators of Eternal Border. The civilian area and VIP area. These two things came to mind. Eternal Kingdom was like the VIP area, and the worlds outside were like the civilian area. The people outside want to squeeze inside, but the people here look down on the people from the outside and try their best to keep them out. Just like that, conflict arises. Xianxia shook his head. He didn't have any feelings toward this. As for Eternal Kingdom, as far as he was concerned, there was nothing good about him. As Sword Scroll had said, there were no rich VIPs before him. Could anyone ever compete in wealth with him? However, Xianxia was quite against the way Eternal Kingdom did things. Or to be more precise, anyone would hate that sense of superiority they had. The people of Eternal Kingdom had a strong sense of superiority. Xianxia restrained his thoughts and entered the city. Practically everyone in the city had a sword on their back, and many of them had quite good cultivations. Besides that, people flew on swords in the air or just flew normally from time to time. It was quite a magnificent sight. Xianxia asked as he traveled, Sword Scroll, can you sense the fragments of your main body? She replied, I can. However, you can't just enter the ancient sword sect like that. It is covered in powerful restrictions, so even your sword domain can't help you sneak in undetected. You must enter it through normal methods. Normal methods? Xianxia frowned. What kind of normal methods? She fell silent for a short while and said, join the ancient sword sect and look for an opportunity to steal those fragments. That's the only way. Otherwise, it would be too dangerous to sneak in. Once your presence is exposed, you'll definitely be hunted by countless people. This isn't like the world outside. 5 world realm experts can fight here, and even experts above the 5 world realm may show themselves. Xianxia thought for a moment and nodded. All right, but how do I join the ancient sword sect? Recommend myself to them? She replied. People will suspect you if you do that, and they'll grow even more suspicious once they investigate you. Xianxia shook his head. This is quite troublesome. Sword Scroll spoke indifferently. If you think it's troublesome, you can charge it and seize it just like that. Xianxia was quite tempted to do that. Meanwhile, Sword Scroll added, there are at least 5 World Realm experts in there. Besides that, there are Lord Realm experts there too, and maybe more than one. Xianxia spoke seriously. I think it isn't troublesome at all. Come on, let's join the ancient sword sect. I was planning on taking a look and learning from them anyway. Xianxia walked off into the distance. Sword Scroll shook her head and smiled in the primordial pagoda. Xianxia found an inn to stay in. According to Sword Scroll, he had to wait until the experts of the ancient sword sect came to recruit in the city, and then he could reveal some of his strength to draw their attention. After that, they would take him to the ancient sword sect. Once he was inside, he could look for an opportunity to steal the fragments of Sword Scroll's main body. That was their plan. Xianxia went to the inn's counter. The manager behind the counter was an old man, and he was actually at the True Void Realm. The manager glanced at Xianxia. Do you need something? Xianxia nodded. Do you know when the ancient sword sect will be coming to recruit people? The manager sized up Xianxia. You want to join them? Xianxia nodded. Yes. The manager fell silent. Xianxia asked, what? Can't I? The manager glanced at Xianxia, and then he lowered his head and continued with his own work. What was the old man trying to convey? Xianxia was quite puzzled. Meanwhile, Sword Scroll suddenly said, Pay up! Pay up! Xianxia immediately realized what he had to do and placed an eternal divine crystal before the old man. The old man was stunned when he saw it. An eternal divine crystal. Xianxia's best crystals were the eternal world crystals. Snowy had taken half of them and he still had some. However, they were too precious, so he couldn't bear to give them away. Thus, he gave the old man an eternal divine crystal. However, he wasn't aware that it was still extremely precious to ordinary people. After all, true Void Realm experts usually used eternal immortal crystals. The old man took a deep and long glance at Xianxia, and then the inn turned ethereal. A short while later, the entire inn was in a boundless expanse of space. He'd been forcefully transported into space. Meanwhile, a beautiful woman suddenly appeared, and she smiled. Young brother, tell me about your origins. Xianxia glanced at the surroundings. There were a few black-clothed experts here, and all of them were at the Limitbreaker realm. One should never reveal their wealth. Xianxia shook his head and said, Can't all of you pursue something better in life? It's just a single eternal divine crystal. Isn't that a little beneath all of you? He flicked over another eternal divine crystal over to them. The woman was stunned by this. Xianxia said, Come on, don't rob me. I'll give all of you one each. You seem so poor, and I really can't bear to let it go on. All of them were stunned speechless. The woman's face gradually became solemn. She hesitated for a moment and asked, Who are you? She was no fool. The man before her seemed so composed, so it was obvious that he wasn't anyone ordinary. He was either an extraordinary expert who was keeping his strength concealed or possessed powerful backing. Xianxia smiled. I'm just an ordinary sword cultivator. An ordinary sword cultivator? She glanced at him and clearly didn't believe it. Xianxia glanced at them and asked, So, are you going to go on with this? The woman hesitated for a moment and waved her right hand. It only took a moment for everything to return to normal. Xianxia was at the inn again, but the old man had been switched for the beautiful woman. She glanced at Xianxia and said, That was a misunderstanding. Please don't take it to heart, young master. She couldn't see through him. Since she couldn't see through him, she couldn't act against him. Always be careful. Xianxia glanced at the surroundings. Is this a shady place? She had quite an awkward expression on her face. Can you not be so direct? Xianxia grinned. I have a question. When will the ancient sword sect be recruiting in the city? She asked. You want to join them? Xianxia nodded. I'm a sword cultivator. She asked. Your cultivation? The true void realm. Xianxia replied. He had suppressed his cultivation with the help of the primordial pagoda, so even a 5-world realm expert couldn't discern his true cultivation. As for experts above that, he wasn't certain. The woman nodded slightly. Your cultivation is enough, but what about your sword Dao? Xianxia was stunned and asked, Is the sword Dao divided into levels too? She replied, Sword intent. Is your sword intent at the true void realm? Xianxia nodded. It is. The strength he revealed right now was the true void realm in both cultivation and sword intent, but his sword intent was always at the true void realm. Of course, it should actually be at the true world realm because he'd even suppressed his sword intent that day. She glanced at him and said, You should be able to join them. However, it only recruits 5 people every year, and at least 4 are monopolized by the clans in the city. In other words, there is only one opportunity left. One spot. Xianxia said, Can I buy one too? Xianxia had no lack of money. The huge amount of wealth Snowy left behind was something that would take a lifetime to waste. Just think about it, how much was a chaotic fruit worth? He had 10 of them, and he even had the world-born fruits that were better than that. Xianxia was as rich as an entire country. She sized up Xianxia and asked, Do you have many divine crystals? Xianxia nodded. I have a few. If it's possible, I don't mind buying my way in. I only wonder how many are required. She thought for a moment and raised a finger. Xianxia asked, 10,000. Her face stiffened. Do you think those are rocks? 10,000? It's 100. Just 100 is enough. 100 are equivalent to a world crystal, and they are impossible to trade for. A single world crystal can recover a limit breaker realm expert's profound energy in an instant, and it can help them advance too. So, if you have a world crystal, then it won't be a problem at all. World crystals. Xianxia scanned the primordial pagoda, and he noticed over 70 of them. He knew they would last for a long time. She suddenly asked, Do you have it? Xianxia nodded. I have over 100 divine crystals. She nodded. So, how about you stay here for now? According to my knowledge, it'll take over a month before they will come. At that time, I'll contact you. We have some connections, so we can contact an outer court elder of the ancient sword sect. However, it will require giving out some bribes and… Xianxia was no fool. He naturally understood what she meant and smiled. Will 10 be enough? She cracked a smile. Of course. Xianxia wasn't worried she would cheat him and flicked 10 divine crystals to her. The woman was quite surprised. She hadn't expected Xianxia to be so generous and decisive. She didn't think too much about it and just took the crystals. Xianxia said, I'm going to get some rest. I'll be waiting for you to give me the news. She smiled. Of course. Xianxia nodded and went to his room. Once he left, an old man appeared before the woman. It was the manager from before. She waved her right hand, and the space here trembled before a thin barrier of light locked down their position. Even the wind couldn't get in. She glanced at the direction Xianxia had left toward, and once she was certain he'd gone to his room, she asked, Have you found out? He shook his head. I couldn't. All I know is he came from outside the city. Outside the city. Her eyes narrowed slightly. He isn't from the West region. The old man nodded. He probably isn't. Otherwise, our network would have definitely been able to find out about him. However, he's absolutely not ordinary. Manager Yoon should… The old man didn't continue. The woman fell silent for a long time. Suddenly, a small black demon beast appeared on her shoulder. A treasure-seeking mouse. She hadn't acted against Xianxia because of a few divine crystals. It was actually because the mouse had sensed the aura of treasures coming from Xianxia. She gazed at it and spoke seriously. A divine treasure? It nodded and sent ripples at her. A long time passed before her eyes narrowed slightly. Even better than divine treasures? And many of them too. The mouse nodded while seeming to be quite excited. If it hadn't sensed danger from Xianxia, it would have charged at him by now. She fell silent for a short while and said, "We may not be able to deal with him on our own. It's quite risky. So we have to get some people to work with us." The old man nodded. "Indeed, he's definitely not ordinary." The woman grinned. "Only the brave ever accomplish things. If worse comes to worse, we'll just start over once we're done with him and go into hiding." She waved her right hand. The barrier vanished, and she walked out of the inn. In the room, Yang Yi sat cross-legged and entered the primordial pagoda. Yang Yi went below the mass of lightning, and he saw the demon beasts charging at it incessantly. It didn't try to kill them, otherwise, if over 100 bolts of divine lightning descended, even Arya would be killed by them. Of course, Yang Yi wasn't certain if they could kill Arya. After all, he didn't know the limits of her body. No one knew where her limits were. All of them were being diligent, and they'd grown even more hardworking in Arya's absence. Arya had gone to have fun, but they were training, because they wanted to surprise her when they met again. Yang Yi smiled and left. He went to the cultivation room. The sword domain. Yang Yi planned to study the sword domain. Or to be more precise, he wanted to develop even more aspects of it and not use it solely for attacking people with the sword. Yang Yi sat down cross-legged and activated the sword domain. In an instant, the entire room was covered beneath the sword domain. In the cultivation room, Yang Ye's senses were extremely sensitive, or it should be said that he'd merged into one with space. Or it could be descended as him having transcended the space here and arriving at a different space. A different space. Yang Ye's eyes suddenly lit up. He still remembered what the desolate emperor had told him. There were many types of space, so what type of space was he in right now? Four-dimensional space? That was clearly impossible. Even an expert like the desolate emperor was barely able to sense its existence, so how could he possibly enter it? If it wasn't four-dimensional space, then what was it? What could it do? Yang Yi pondered deeply for a long time. Suddenly he stood up and left the pagoda. He arrived below the lightning, and then he expanded the sword domain and enveloped the primal true dragon. The dragon immediately stopped when the sword domain enveloped it, and it gazed at Yang Yi with a questioning gaze. Yang Yi stared at the dragon, and it made a chill run down its spine. The demons were extremely respectful toward Yang Yi. Firstly, even Arya and Snowy feared Yang Yi, so they naturally feared him too. As for the most important reason, Yang Yi was very strong, even stronger than them. Moreover, his temper was very bad, so bad that even Arya had to be good when he went berserk. Suddenly, Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. Sensing. Yang Yi sent out his divine sense to sense everything about the dragon. At this moment, the dragon was completely revealed before him. The dragon was quite anxious. Suddenly, Yang Yi said, "Attack me!" The dragon was stunned. Yang Yi said, "Hurry up!" The dragon hesitated and shook its head. It didn't really dare to attack Yang Yi. Yang Yi continued, "I'm training, so just attack me. Otherwise, I'll tell Arya you cursed her behind her back. Right? And I'll eat the chaotic fruits and say you did it." The dragon was furious. It glared at Yang Yi and howled inwardly. "How can you be so shameless?" It didn't dare to imagine the consequences of that. The primal true dragon attacked. All the demons watched as it slammed itself at Yang Yi. Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly, and then his figure turned completely ethereal as if it didn't exist in this space. Bang! A moment later, Yang Yi was blasted away. He flew over 10 kilometers away. The dragon was stunned. He's not fighting back? The dragon became quite anxious when it saw a trace of blood seep out from the corner of Yang Ye's mouth. If Snowy and Arya found out that it had made Yang Yi bleed, it would be skinned alive. While the dragon was feeling anxious and uneasy, Yang Yi crawled up from the ground and said, "Come on, continue." The dragon was stunned. Yang Yi wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth and said, "Come, don't worry, you're just training with me." It nodded when it noticed that Yang Yi didn't seem to be lying, and it charged at Yang Yi again. Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the dragon, and it didn't take long for the dragon to slam against him. Bang! Yang Yi was blasted away once more. This time, Yang Yi took a long time to get back on his feet. This time, blood wasn't just coming out from his mouth. Even his face had turned ghastly pale. The dragon didn't dare to attack when it noticed this. However, it had no choice when Yang Yi urged it to do so. Just like that, Yang Yi was blasted away over and over again. But it didn't take long for Yang Yi to get up again and make the dragon attack once more. As time passed, all the demons felt that Yang Yi had a thing for being hit. Outside the primordial pagoda, there was quite a huge flow of people in and out of the inn. At the counter, the beautiful woman gazed at the accounts before her, and the old man, the manager, stood before her. She asked, "So?" The old man replied softly, "They have agreed to it. However, they want 70% of the young man's treasures once it's done." 70%. The woman laughed coldly. "Aren't they being a little too greedy?" The old man laughed bitterly. "They've always been this greedy." The woman fell silent for a long time and said, 60%. That's the most. If they want more, we will pull out." The manager nodded. "All right, right?" She suddenly asked, "How many experts are they sending?" The manager replied solemnly, "Just himself. He's a 3-world realm expert. As far as he's concerned, it's guaranteed to succeed with us. Actually, he may think that just he alone is sufficient for it." The 3-world realm. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm afraid it may not be enough." The old man said, "He's only at the true void realm. Even if he has trump cards, our forces and a 3-world realm expert should be enough, right?" She shook her head. "He feels very dangerous to me. He isn't ordinary. Ask him if he can contact some higher-ups of the ancient sword sect. It's best if success is absolutely guaranteed." The old man nodded and left. Once the old man left, she looked up at the stairs and spoke softly. "Honest business never makes money as fast as robbing. So, you can only blame yourself for having such bad luck." In the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi was still training. Presently, his body was on the verge of collapse. The dragon couldn't bear to attack again. 10 days later, as always, the dragon charged at Yang Yi. While it was enveloped by the sword domain, causing it to sense a strand of pressure, it didn't affect the dragon's speed and strength. It was very fast. Practically took an instant to arrive before Yang Yi. Right when the dragon slammed against Yang Yi, boom! Suddenly, the dragon seemed like it had been struck by a sledgehammer and was blasted down from midair. The dragon looked up at Yang Yi with bewilderment on its face. Yang Yi took a deep breath while excitement filled his eyes. He waved at the dragon. "Continue!" The dragon hesitated for a moment and charged at Yang Yi once more. However, as soon as it did that, he was blasted to the ground before it could even react. The dragon was utterly stunned. Yang Ye's laughter grew louder. The sword domain. Throughout this time, he'd been focused on a single thing, and it was to analyze his opponent with the sword domain. He was analyzing his opponent's flaws, moves, and everything else. Simply speaking, he'd completely analyzed his opponent and attacked based on what he'd discovered. In the sword domain, he could sense everything. It could be said that it was like a huge brain, and this brain helped him analyze and sense everything. If someone was within the sword domain, it was like that person was stripped bare before him. That person was translucent and without any secrets. In the beginning, when he tried to quickly analyze the dragon's flaws and attack patterns, he found it to be quite difficult. Because the dragon was very fast and strong, he couldn't accomplish it in an instant. But after training over a long period and repeated trials and errors, Yang Yi had created a method. A method to swiftly detect his opponent's flaws and attack pattern. The method required him to merge into space and use the changes in space to sense his opponent. Besides that, he'd changed the way his flying swords attacked too. When he thought of the flying swords, Yang Yi gazed at the dragon and smiled. "Come, let's continue." The dragon glanced at him and leaped up. At the same instant, the sword gourd on Yang Ye's waist shook, and then a flying sword appeared above the dragon and pressed against its forehead. The dragon was stunned speechless. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly, and then the flying sword kept appearing all over the sword domain. It wasn't flying, it was just emerging out of space. The flying swords didn't fly in the sword domain, They used the space in the sword domain to teleport instantaneously. Moreover, they didn't grow weaker and had grown stronger instead. Because they were using the powerful propulsion force in space, the enhancement provided by the sword domain, and the explosive force that came from the sword gourd. It could be said that their speed and strength had risen a level higher. The ability to detect flaws with the sword domain could be considered as a huge improvement to Yang Yi. If he fought a 5-world realm expert again, while he didn't dare to say he could kill such an expert with ease, it would absolutely not be that difficult as his last battle. Moreover, he was 80% confident in winning the battle, without using any external sources of strength. Just his own pure strength. Now, he just wanted to fight, especially with a Nanjing, because her combat instinct was extraordinary, and he wanted to know if he could suppress her with the sword domain. A Nanjing. Yang Yi dispersed the sword domain and looked up at the sky. He wondered how a Nanjing, Area, and Snowy were doing. A long time passed before he shook his head and smiled. Instead of worrying about them, he should worry about himself. He knew their strength well, and even a 5-world realm expert would be beaten up like a dog before them. Suddenly, Yang Yi looked up at the sky and left the pagoda. A voice came from outside the door. "Young master, can I come in?" It was the beautiful woman's voice. Yang Yi waved his right hand and the door opened. She grinned at Yang Yi and entered the room. She glanced at the surroundings and asked, "Were you cultivating?" Yang Yi nodded. "What is it?" "Have the people of the ancient sword sect arrived?" She smiled. "Yes. Congratulations, because we've contacted Elder Li of the ancient sword sect, and he had agreed to meet you. Your own attainments aren't bad, so if you are able to curry favor with Elder Li, then entering the ancient sword sect will be practically guaranteed." Yang Yi glanced at her and said, "Thanks." She smiled. "Don't mention it. I've gained quite a bit from you. Right, if it's possible. Can you come with me to meet Elder Li now?" Yang Yi asked, "Is he not coming over here?" She rolled her eyes at him. "Young master, just think about his identity, and we are the ones seeking his help. How could he possibly come to us? It's naturally we who have to go to him, right?" Yang Yi stood up. "Then we shall." She hesitated for a moment and asked, "Young master, what's your name?" Yang Yi smiled. "Yi." She thought for a moment and asked, "There's a clan in the south region, the Yi clan. Are you from there?" Yang Yi shook his head. "No, I'm just an independent cultivator." While she didn't really believe him, she didn't ask further. It didn't take long for them to leave the inn, and then she led Yang Yi out of the city toward a mountain range. Yang Yi asked, "He's outside the city?" She smiled. "Elder Li prefers quiet places, so he set the meeting point outside the city. He's fond of quiet places." Yang Yi glanced at her, smiled, and didn't say anything. However, the woman's heart shuddered for some reason. It didn't take long for them to arrive deep within the mountains, and there was no one here for miles. She led Yang Yi deep into a forest, and Yang Yi saw a middle-aged man in a gray robe. Obviously, it was Elder Li. Elder Li glanced at Yang Yi and asked, "You want to join the ancient sword sect?" Yang Yi nodded. "Senior, please." The old man suddenly waved his hand. "I'll be frank. A treasure-seeking mouse sensed the aura of various treasures, including divine treasures, in your possession. Are you going to hand them over, or shall I take them instead?" Yang Yi was stunned for a moment, and then he gazed at the beautiful woman. At this moment, there was no smile on her face, only extreme coldness. Yang Ye's face turned pale as he pointed at her with a trembling hand. What are you planning?" She replied indifferently, "What are we planning? You fool. Have you not realized? We plan to rob you." "Rob me?" Yang Yi suddenly spoke angrily. Do you not respect the law? Do you not respect reason? You're actually trying to rob me in broad daylight. What are you waiting for then? Hurry up and do it." The woman was stunned, speechless. Yang Yi was no fool. So, how could he have not noticed that the woman had been acting strangely? However, he couldn't be bothered to expose her. Or it should be said that he wanted to give her a chance to change her ways. Unfortunately, she hadn't cherished that opportunity. Besides that, He really wanted to meet this Elder Li. Elder Li had the ability to get him into the ancient sword sect. The beautiful woman and Elder Li frowned when they heard him. Especially the woman. There was only vigilance left in her eyes. Xianxia smiled. Didn't you want to rob me? Come on then. She gazed at him for a long time, and then she waved her right hand. 3 black-clothed figures appeared around Xianxia. All of them were at the limit-breaker realm. She gazed coldly at Xianxia. Kill him! Hiss! 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 As soon as she gave the order, both she and Elder Li watched with shock as the heads of all 3 black-clothed experts flew into the air. They had just flown into the air. Even the woman and Elder Li hadn't been able to discern how those heads were taken. At this moment, the woman's face was ghastly pale. She knew that they'd bitten off more than they could chew. As for Elder Li, his face was extremely solemn. Xianxia glanced at the surroundings and said, If I'm not wrong, you chose this place because there aren't any people here. So, no one would know about anything you've done here, right? He suddenly gazed at Elder Li. Don't bother sending news of this through space. I've locked down the space here, so you can't send anything out. Elder Li's eyes narrowed slightly. Who are you? Xianxia shook his head. I don't want to waste my breath on you. I need to get into the ancient sword sect, so give me something that proves I've gained a spot. You plan to sneak into the ancient sword sect. Elder Li's face was gloomy. Who are you? Xianxia shook his head. Swish. A ray of light flashed. Hiss. Elder Li's arm flew up into the air while blood sprayed like a fountain. The beautiful woman's face turned even paler from the sight of this. She'd still been hopeful earlier. She felt that Elder Li definitely had the strength to fight this young man. However, the cruel truth before her made it clear that he didn't. Elder Li's eyes were filled with shock. Just a moment ago, he'd actually been unable to sense that sword energy at all. Was the young man before him at the 5-world realm? Xianxia walked slowly in Elder Li's direction. I need a spot to join the ancient sword sect. Do I need to repeat myself? Elder Li stared at Xianxia. Don't even think about it. Xianxia shook his head and smiled. Meanwhile, Sword Scroll's voice resounded in his mind. He has the ancient sword token. Just get that. Xianxia nodded. Meanwhile, Elder Li turned around and fled toward the sky. He was extremely swift and instantly arrived over 10 kilometers away. However, a ray of sword energy was faster than him. Hiss! The ray of sword energy flashed, and then Elder Li's head fell off his neck. Xianxia waved his right hand, and Elder Li's spatial ring flew over to him. Sure enough, he found a command token in there. The ancient sword token. Xianxia put it away. As for everything else, all of it was trash to him. He may not have learned much from Snowy, but he'd learned to be picky. As far as Snowy was concerned, there were few things in this world that were up to her standards. Xianxia put the command token away and glanced at the beautiful woman. Why haven't you tried to flee? She laughed miserably. Can I? She took a deep breath and continued. Before I die, can you tell me who you are? Xianxia shook his head. No. Xianxia's sword descended, and her head flew into the air. Xianxia waved his right hand, and all the corpses here were turned to ash. Xianxia shook his head. Robbing is risky and should be done cautiously. Xianxia vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. Xianxia returned to Ancient Sword City. This time he didn't return to the inn, and he went to a place called Ancient Sword Hall instead. Once he presented the command token, the manager before the door welcomed him inside. Xianxia saw a man and a woman in the hall. The man wore a white robe, and he immediately glanced at Xianxia when Xianxia entered. A moment later, he moved his gaze away. As for the woman, she nodded slightly to Xianxia as a way to greet him. Xianxia nodded as well and sat at the side. None of them spoke. A long time passed before the man suddenly asked, Manager Su, when will Elder Li be here? An old man walked in and laughed bitterly. Young Master Mou, I do not know. The man called Mou frowned. You can't just make us wait here forever, right? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, Let me try contacting him. He turned around and left. Only Yang Yi and the others remained in the hall. Mou glanced at Yang Yi and asked, "The true Void Realm?" Yang Yi nodded. "Yes." Mou moved his gaze away and didn't say anything else. It was because he was at the true world realm. They weren't on the same level, so there was naturally nothing to speak about. The woman, on the other hand, spoke abruptly. "I'm at the true Void Realm too." Yang Yi grinned at her. "What's your name?" "Yu Qinggu." She smiled. "What about you?" Yang Yi replied, "Yi Yang." "Yi Yang." She nodded and asked, "Are you from the Yi clan in the South region?" Yang Yi shook his head. "I'm just an independent cultivator." "An independent cultivator." "Oh." She didn't say more than that. Yang Yi didn't say anything either and just waited in silence. Meanwhile, he asked inwardly, "Sword Scroll, why has the ancient sword sect been keeping the fragments of your body?" She fell silent for a short while and explained, "It's still the fragments of a super divine treasure. What else can they do? Toss it away." Yang Yi asked, "Is the ancient sword sect's master from all those years ago still alive?" She replied, "Yes, but he was heavily injured by the desolate emperor, and even his body was destroyed. Can be said that his strength isn't what it used to be. Of course, I don't know how much he has recovered over the years. That's why I wanted you to sneak in, and then look for an opportunity to steal my fragments." Yang Yi nodded. "That's all we can do." Just like that, the three of them waited for around 2 hours in the hall, and then a middle-aged man appeared. They gazed at the middle-aged man, and the latter said, "I'm Gu Xiu, an elder of the ancient sword sect. Now, I'm in charge here." They bowed slightly to him, and then Mou asked, "Senior, what about elderly?" Gu Xiu replied indifferently, "Something has happened to him, and the sect has started investigating the matter. Now come with me to the ancient sword sect." "Right. Show me your ancient sword tokens." All three of them produced a token. Once he verified them, Gu Xiu nodded, "Let's go." Just like that, he led them out of the city. They shot swiftly through the clouds on their swords. Yang Yi was using an energy sword and not his own swords. It was because he only had divine treasures or a super divine treasure to use as his sword, and that would draw too much attention. Mou glanced at Yang Yi, and then he flicked a sword over to Yang Yi. A pseudo-divine treasure. Yang Yi gazed at Mou with bewilderment, and the latter spoke indifferently, "You can keep it." He naturally had to make friends in the ancient sword sect. While the young man before him wasn't worth becoming friends with, he could still make Yang Yi side with him. It wasn't bad to have some lackeys and people to do things for you in the ancient sword sect. Yang Yi glanced at Mou and shook his head. "I don't need it." Mou frowned, took the sword back, and then said, "How insensible." He sped up and left both Yang Yi and Yu Qinggu far behind. Yu Qinggu flew over to Yang Ye's side and smiled. "That was a pseudo-divine treasure. Why didn't you accept it?" Yang Yi shook his head. "I don't need it." "Why?" She sized up Yang Yi and smiled. "Interesting. Anyway, you're here for the ancient sword sect's renowned ancient sword scroll, right?" Yang Yi was puzzled. "The ancient sword scroll?" She replied with a question. "You don't know about it?" Yang Yi was about to speak when Sword Scroll suddenly explained, "It's a sword scroll that I created. It's trash to you because your flying swords and sword domain have completely surpassed the scope of that technique. Besides that, I know practically everything in the ancient sword sect, and I even know things that those old geezers are unaware of. So, I'll tell you if there's anything suitable for you." Yang Yi nodded. "All right." Meanwhile, Yu Qinggu asked again, "You don't know about the ancient sword scroll?" Yang Yi thought for a moment and replied, "Of course I do. It's a divine treasure. But we probably won't have the chance, right?" She smiled. "How would we know without giving it a try? Moreover, I heard the ancient sword sect has a super divine treasure, the sword hall, sword book, and sword scroll. The three of them are one. It would be great if I could have the chance to see it." "It's a super divine treasure." Yang Yi frowned and spoke solemnly in his heart. "Looks like the ancient sword sect didn't allow news of it to escape their sect." Sword Scroll replied indifferently, "A single super divine treasure can deter many. so they naturally wouldn't. The world thinks I'm still in the ancient sword sect right now. Xianxia said, forget that. Once I get those fragments, we'll leave the ancient sword sect. Then Snowy can repair your body once she returns. Sword Scroll fell silent for a moment and said, thank you. Xianxia shook his head. I should be the one thanking you. All right, let's not linger on this. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his eyes, and he saw a huge sword floating in the distant sky. However, he was stunned by the sight of it. Wasn't it the executor that was in his possession? What the heck? Favorite executor. A huge sword was floating in the distant sky, and it was the same sword in his possession. Of course, it was a fake made from unknown metal as he had the real one. Meanwhile, Sword Scroll suddenly said, executor once resided in this sect. However, it was during an era before me, the ancient times. So, it's not strange. Xianxia frowned slightly. Executor was here? She replied, yes. However, I don't know the specifics because it was 2 eras before me. Xianxia wanted to ask more, but Wuxia suddenly said, we're here. They'd arrived. Xianxia restrained his thoughts and looked into the distance. A towering peak stood there, and behind it was an endless mountain range. Atop the mountain range was a grand palace. People were frequently flying through the sky on their swords there. Besides that, the entire mountain emanated a wave of powerful sword intent. It wasn't ordinary. That was Xianxia's first impression. Wuxia led them to the mountain, and many divine senses swept them during this time. A formation. It was a type of formation used to see through a person's cultivation and age, so that others couldn't sneak into the ancient sword sect. Something worth mentioning was that it had been built by Sword Scroll. So Xianxia was able to get through smoothly. Wuxia brought them to a smaller mountain, the Outer Court Peak. The ancient sword sect was divided into the Outer Court, Inner Court, and Elites. The Outer Court usually represented cultivators between the True Dao realm and World Lord realm, and the Inner Court was for those at the 1 to 3 world realms. As for Elites, only those at the 4 world realm could become elite disciples, and they were equivalent to core disciples. They were core figures of the sect. Of course, they weren't really at its core. The true core of the sect were its experts at the 5 world realm and above. Wuxia led them to the Outer Court Peak before leaving. They had to report in. Mou looked up into the depths of the distant sky and a confident smile curled up on his face. I, Mou, will definitely become an elite disciple. He immediately vanished on his sword. Yuqinggu suddenly said, he's very confident. Xianxia shrugged. That's a good thing, isn't it? She smiled. What about you? Do you want to be one? Xianxia thought for a moment and said, I may be interested if it's the position of sect master. She was stunned by this. Meanwhile, Xianxia had walked off. She shook her head and smiled. That is what they consider a daydream, huh? She went after Xianxia. At the place to report their arrival, Xianxia and Yuqinggu obtained a command token once they were done. It was the command token for Outer Court disciples. According to Yuqinggu, they were disciples of the ancient sword sect now. So, if they encountered enemies outside the sect in the future, they could use this identity, and the people outside would usually give them some face. Thus, it was no different than a life-saving talisman. However, as far as Xianxia was concerned, it may also be a talisman that brought death. At many times, using such an identity could instill fear in others. But if one encountered someone ruthless, that person may just decide to kill you just to keep you quiet instead. Once they became disciples of the sect, they were qualified to attend classes here. They were classes by elders at the 5 world realm, and they were about knowledge in the Sword Dao. However, they were only held once a month. Their luck wasn't bad as it just happened to be the day of the class. At the lecture platform, an old man sat cross-legged on a circular platform, and there were a few dozen stone stairs below it, and below the stairs were no less than 100 meditation cushions. It was practically full when Xianxia and Yuqinggu arrived. Fortunately, there were some empty spots. However, the spot was a little special, because it was right at the front, and there were 3 open cushions. Since there was no one there, Xianxia led Yuqinggu over there, and it didn't take long for countless people here to gaze at them. Yang Yi and Yu Qinggu exchanged glances. Obviously, they'd sensed that something was off. However, wouldn't it be embarrassing to leave now? So, Yang Yi just went forward. Meanwhile, Mou's voice resounded in both Yang Yi and Yu Qingwu's heads. I'll give you a friendly reminder. It belongs to Lu Yunxian, so it's best if you don't sit there. Lu Yunxian? Yang Yi shook his head and asked, Sword Scroll? Do you know who that is? Sword Scroll rolled her eyes at Yang Yi from within the pagoda. Can you not make me doubt your intelligence? When was I here? Besides a few old geezers in the sect, do you think I would know anyone else here? Not to mention an outer court disciple. Yang Yi smiled embarrassedly, and then he hesitated for a moment and gazed at Yu Qinggu. Are you going to sit here? She hesitated for a moment and shook her head. So many people hadn't sat there. Obviously, Lu Yunxian was extraordinary. She didn't want to get in trouble, nor did she want to break a taboo. Yang Yi shook his head and smiled. The sword Tao is boundless, and how many difficulties are there on that path? If a person's name can make you stop, how will you ever continue forward? Yang Yi walked over as he spoke. As far as he was concerned, it was just a seat, and it didn't matter if he used it or not. However, he felt that Yu Qinggu wasn't bad. Since they'd met and fate had brought them together, he'd reminded her of that. Of course, whether she understood was her own problem. Just like that, Yang Yi sat at the center seat of the three. Meanwhile, Yu Qinggu was stunned for a while. She seemed to have thought of something, causing her to become slightly excited and overjoyed. But it didn't take long for her to calm down, because she'd thought of many things like the consequences and trouble that would come. A long time passed before she shot a complicated glance at Yang Yi. She didn't follow him. Yang Yi sighed softly in his heart but didn't say anything. It was normal to have such concerns. The sword Tao was like the future that everyone in the mortal world talked about. Why did many people live mediocre lives? Because they were afraid and didn't dare to risk it all. They thought of failure before they even tried something. They considered their way out before they even took the first step. Rejection. At most times, they rejected their own chances before something even began. As far as Yang Yi was concerned, if someone refused to try, only a life of mediocrity awaited. But if someone tried, even failure was better than not trying. So long as one was alive, one always had a chance. But if one feared failure and was fearful in everything, what was the point of doing anything? Just like this very moment, Yu Qinggu didn't dare to step forward because she feared Lu Yunxian. Since others didn't dare to do it, why should she? But she had never thought about why she had to fear him. Even if she was beaten up and tortured for it, so long as she remained alive, she could work hard to grow stronger and take revenge. After all, they were all geniuses. Sword Scroll sighed softly in the primordial pagoda. As someone who'd lived as long as her, she'd seen all sorts of geniuses, but she rarely saw one with Yang Ye's mentality. It could be said that Yang Ye's natural talent was absolutely inferior when compared to a Nanjing. But there was something he had which wasn't inferior to her, and it was his will and mentality. His mentality to never accept defeat or fear it. Just as Yang Yi had said in the past, he'd lost, suffered, and almost died. He'd cried too, but he had never cowered. At this moment, Yang Yi was clearly the center of attention. The five-world realm expert glanced at Yang Yi and continued with his lass. Yang Yi listened seriously. Needless to say, the old man's class was very good, and he'd gained something from it. A long time later, the old man stopped and gazed at them. 3 questions. Raise your hands. Countless raised their hands. The old man glanced at a young man with a mole by the side of his mouth. Because the young man had been very focused on the class and was frequently in deep thought. The young man hurriedly stood up when he saw the old man's gaze fall on him. He bowed and said, Elder Xian, I learned a sword technique, the same one as senior brother Lu Yunxian. But why is mine much weaker than his? The old man glanced at the young man and asked, How many times have you cultivated it? The young man thought for a moment and replied, A month, 100 times per day. The old man replied, Go back and train 3,000 times per day. Persist for 6 months. Then try again. He gazed at the others. Continue. It didn't take long for the old man to answer two more questions. Right when they thought Elder Xian would be leaving, he gazed at Yang Yi. That seat belongs exclusively to a disciple called Lu Yunxian. It's empty on both sides because no one dares to sit by his side. Did you know that? Yang Yi was slightly stunned. He hadn't expected the old man to suddenly speak to him, and so he replied with a question. So what? Elder Xian said. Lu Yunxian is at the Limit Breaker realm, and he's becoming an inner court disciple very soon. While he's only at the One World realm, he can defeat 2 World realm experts. Yang Yi thought for a moment and asked, Senior, did the ancient sword sect give these 3 seats to him? The old man shook his head. Yang Yi smiled. See? Since they don't really belong to him, why can't I use them? We should be reasonable people, right? Reason. The old man had a spurious smile on his face. You like to reason with people? Yang Yi nodded and replied seriously. I've always believed that communication and reasoning with others is the only way to resolve conflict. Sword Scroll shook her head in the pagoda. The way Yang Yi reasoned with people was a little special, and most people were unaware of that. Many laughed when they heard Yang Yi. Reason. It naturally existed in this world, but the preconditioning for reasoning with others was strength. Because at most times, the strong would never reason with the weak. Just like how a human would never reason with a pig, right? Survival of the fittest. It was vividly displayed by humans. Elder Xian gazed at Yang Yi for a long time and said, You're either an idiot or an extraordinary genius. He shot off on his sword once he finished speaking. Once Elder Xian left, everyone gazed at Yang Yi. They clearly seemed to take pleasure in his misfortune, but they were also curious. Of course, most of them were taking pleasure in his misfortune. The first person to break a taboo would always receive strange gazes from others. Yang Yi ignored them and left. Yu Qinggu hesitated for a moment and followed Yang Yi. She glanced at him and said, We should keep a low profile. Yang Yi smiled. You think I'm not? She nodded. Absolutely. Yang Yi chuckled and said, Miss Qinggu, I don't agree with you. All right, forget that. I have other things to do, so farewell. Yang Yi vanished on the spot. She stopped on the spot and lowered her head slightly in deep thought. No one knew what she was thinking. A long time passed before she sighed softly and left. Yang Yi went to the mountain range behind the sect. It was part of the sect's territory, and there were powerful demon beasts here. However, these demon beasts were being fostered by the ancient sword sect itself, or they could be considered as subordinates of the sect. After searching for a long time, Yang Yi found a quiet place and entered the primordial pagoda. Cultivation. Now, he used every moment he had to cultivate, both in the sword domain and flying swords. He wanted to make the best use of his sword domain, or to be more precise, he wanted to bring out the most from it. Especially the ability to analyze his opponent's flaws with the sword domain. He wanted to cultivate it to the extreme. So long as his enemy didn't destroy the sword domain, he was invincible within it. Of course, there were special circumstances like in Nanjing and Area. He didn't know how strong in Nanjing was, and Area's body was so abnormal that she was practically invincible against those in the same realm of cultivation. Fortunately, they were on his side. At the world in the first level, Yang Yi stood on the spot. The dragon and Oxy were in front of him. Yang Yi gazed at them and said, Attack me together. Oxy was quite hesitant, but it didn't take long for Yang Yi to say, If you don't use your full strength, I'll tell Snowy and Area that you were talking behind their backs. I'm sure you know that they'll believe me, right? Oxy discarded his hesitance completely, and he just raised his axe and charged at Yang Yi. At this moment, he just wanted to chop Yang Yi to death. The dragon leaped up and slammed itself at Yang Yi as well. Yang Yi stared at them. At this moment, he was using space to clearly sense their flaws and intentions. Especially Oxy, he was full of flaws. If it was a life and death battle, he could take Oxy's head before Oxy's axe even descended. As for the dragon, it was very fast and powerful, but it was using space to propel itself forward. Moreover, its weak point was the reverse scale, and Yang Yi had deduced at least 3 ways to strike that reverse scale at the instant the dragon had attacked. However, Yang Yi didn't attack. Once he finished analyzing everything, he knew he could crush them with ease. So, at this moment, their speed started to slow down in his mind. Actually, it was the sword domain that helped improve his instinct in battle. Time trickled by, and it didn't take long for Yang Yi to attack. Flying swords. His flying sword could simply be described as coming and going like a shadow within the sword domain. His flying swords weren't really flying within his sword domain, they were teleporting through the space within the sword domain. Could be said that they had merged into one with space because of him. In the sword domain, 3-dimensional space was completely within his control. Wuxia and the dragon were gradually incapable of fighting back. It was an absolutely aggrieving battle to them, because they were constantly being forced into a passive position and weren't even able to touch Yang Ye's clothes. A short while later, they seemed to have noticed something, and they stopped attacking Yang Yi and moved their attention to his sword domain instead. Destroy the sword domain. Brute force. As Wuxia and the dragon started to attack it violently, Yang Ye's countenance instantly turned pale. He didn't attack again and just dispersed the sword domain. After that, he gazed at them and laughed bitterly. Once the sword domain was gone, his ability to analyze them vanished. Because he couldn't just use space alone to sense everything about them. Besides that, there was another critical flaw, and it was that he had to end the fight quickly when he fought powerful opponents within the sword domain. Otherwise, if his opponent attacked the sword domain, it would cause grave harm to him, harm to his soul. Actually, at the moment they wanted to destroy the sword domain, he could have struck a lethal strike on both of them. However, their actions allowed him to realize a flaw in his sword domain. But it was normal because there was nothing truly perfect. Yang Yi left, and Wuxia and the dragon heaved sighs of relief. They were truly afraid of Yang Yi. Yang Yi was a terrifying threat to them. It made them wonder if all humans were so shameless. At the Ascension platform, Yang Yi found Sword Scroll. Sword Scroll suddenly said, "You must become an elite disciple." Yang Yi was puzzled. Why? Sword Scroll spoke solemnly. Only elite disciples can enter the most secret place in the ancient sword sect, the ancient sword cave. It's where the ancient sword sect's founder fell, and it's the most mysterious place in the sect. My main body is there too. It's protected by extraordinary experts, so you must enter openly, and that's the only way for you to obtain the fragments of my main body. An elite disciple. Yang Yi had quite the headache. It's too troublesome. I don't want to waste too much time here. Do you have any other ideas? She replied indifferently. Take it by force? Want to try that? Force. Yang Yi laughed embarrassedly. He knew it was impossible because he didn't want to be hunted. Moreover, he may not even be able to succeed. Sword Scroll said, based on your natural talent and strength, it won't take long for you to succeed. Besides that, if my main body is restored, then if it's combined with your sword domain, I dare guarantee that you can even annihilate 5 World Realm experts in an instant. Even Lord Realm experts would be easily killed. Yang Yi was excited. Is it that strong? Sword Scroll replied indifferently. The spirits of the demon wings of death and executor are either in deep sleep or unconscious from a severe injury. But I'm different, my spirit is whole. So, if my main body is restored, you will truly possess a super divine treasure. One with its spirit intact. That's a completely different thing. Yang Yi fell silent. He naturally understood what she meant. Executor couldn't unleash its full strength right now, and its spirit hadn't acknowledged him as its master, nor would it try to assist him in battle. But Sword Scroll was different. If her main body was restored, she would help him. The full support of a super divine treasure combined with his own identity as a sword cultivator would allow him to unleash absolutely extraordinary strength. A short while later, Yang Yi shook his head and chuckled. Sword Scroll? You're afraid I wouldn't retrieve those fragments for you, right? She glanced at him and remained silent. Yang Yi said, I didn't come here with you for a super divine treasure. Yes, I'm someone who only seeks benefits at some times, but it depends on the person. Consider retrieving your main body as my way of repaying you for all the help you've given me. As for what you do after you've recovered, I won't force you to stay. I'm not playing tricks or trying to make you feel moved. This is just how I think. Yang Yi left the pagoda once he finished speaking. Sword Scroll remained silent on the ascension platform. Outside the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi returned to the ancient sword sect. Every outer court disciple had their own abode, and he did too. An elite disciple. He had to find a way to become an elite disciple now, and he had to first become an inner court disciple. He could only take it a step at a time because if he did it too quickly, it would increase his chances of being suspected and getting into trouble. He was here to steal. No, those fragments belonged to Sword Scroll, so he wasn't really stealing. He was just returning them to their rightful owner. An inner court disciple. Yang Yi left his room and went to Yu Qinggu. She gazed at him with astonishment. You want to become an inner court disciple? Yang Yi nodded. Can't I? She glanced at him and replied. You must pass a test to become one, and only Limit Breaker realm experts can pass it. But Yang Yi was only at the true void realm. Yang Yi asked, What's the test? She was about to answer him when laughter suddenly came from the side. Wow! This young junior brother just became an outer court disciple, yet he wants to become an inner court disciple already. TSK, TSK. Outstanding! Yang Yi and Yu Qinggu looked over, and they saw a man with a sword in his grasp. He was wearing a large and loose robe, and he had a sword chest on his back. Yang Yi replied with a question. Can't I? The man was slightly stunned and chuckled. Of course, but it sounds quite funny to me. Let me tell you a story. There was once an ant who actually wanted to move a tree. Tell me, isn't that laughable? Suddenly, Yang Yi vanished on the spot, and then everyone here was stunned. Yang Yi had suddenly grabbed hold of the man's throat. Yang Yi squeezed down slightly and looked the man in the eyes. Go on. Continue. Laugh for me. Huh? Why aren't you laughing? Fucking laugh right now. Everyone here was stunned, especially the other outer court disciples who'd been standing behind the man. As for the most shocked, it was Yu Qinggu because the young man in Xianxia's grasp was an actual true world realm expert. A true world realm expert hadn't even been able to fight back against a true void realm expert. Yang Yi looked the young man in the eyes. Why aren't you laughing? He squeezed down even more as he spoke. At this moment, how could the young man even laugh? He was on the verge of death. His face was terrifyingly pale. Yi Yang. Meanwhile, an outer court disciple spoke angrily. That senior brother Su Fan, you? That outer court disciple hadn't even finished speaking when Yang Yi slammed the man into the ground. Bang! The ground cracked open while blood sprayed. Yang Yi patted his hands together and looked up at the outer court disciple who'd just spoken. What did you just say? I didn't hear you properly. Why don't you repeat that again? That outer court disciple's face was quite unsightly. He mustered up the courage to repeat himself, but he immediately discarded that thought when he saw the terrible state Su Fan was in. Yang Yi withdrew his gaze and looked at Su Fan who'd stood up now. The first thing Su Fan did upon standing up was to draw his sword. He swung it. Such a terrible humiliation had made his mind lose clarity. Under normal circumstances, he should apologize because anyone could discern that the man before him wasn't someone he could go against. But at this moment, Su Fan's mind was filled with rage and was utterly devoid of clarity. Just like that, he was blasted away as soon as he drew his sword, and his figure flew over 1 kilometer away. Su Fan spat out multiple mouthfuls of blood as he flew while his body cracked open, inch by inch. It was just a tiny bit away from completely collapsing. It was obvious how heavy Yang Ye's attack had been. Bang! Su Fan crashed to the ground. At this moment, his mind had cleared up completely. He was no match for Yang Yi. That was the conclusion he'd come to. Yang Yi walked over to Su Fan, and the others in the surroundings gazed at Yang Yi fearfully. Yang Yi ignored them and looked down at Su Fan. No hatred is without reason, and it's the same for conflict. So, tell me why you've come in search of trouble with me. Su Fan stared at Yang Yi and remained silent. Yang Yi grinned. I'll count to 3. I'll shatter your body if you don't answer me. Yi Yang. One of the other outer court disciples spoke abruptly. That's against the sect's rules. Yuqinggu spoke softly. Brother Ya, the sect doesn't prohibit sparring, but you can't go too far. You'll be expelled if you destroy his body. Expelled. Yang Yi gazed at Su Fan and smiled. This is what you're relying on? It's fine. You can give it a try and see if I dare to shatter your body. Yang Yi raised 3 fingers. Su Fan was quite an unyielding person, and he remained silent even after Yang Yi had countered to 2. Yang Yi shook his head and smiled, and then he kicked Su Fan's stomach. Bang! Su Fan's body instantly exploded apart. It was gone. His body was gone. Everyone here was stunned, including Su Fan. He was just a soul now, and he hadn't expected the man before him would actually dare to destroy his body. His body was gone. Su Fan's mind had gone blank. While his body could be rebuilt, and the ancient sword sect had the treasures to assist with that, how long would it take? Moreover, having it shattered would affect him tremendously. His future was gone. Could be said that his future was truly gone. Su Fan's face was covered in despair. Yang Yi gazed at the other outer court disciple. You should know why he came to look for trouble with me, right? That outer court disciple glanced at Yang Yi, hesitated for a moment, and said, Senior brother Lu Yin. Yang Yi asked, He ordered this? That outer court disciple shook his head. Senior brother Su Fan knows that you sat at senior brother Lu Yunxian's spot, so he came to look for trouble with you. He felt you had no right to sit there, so he wanted to teach you a lesson on behalf of senior brother Lu Yunxian. Yang Yi shook his head and chuckled. He gazed at Su Fan, who was just a soul now. Are you in such a hurry to curry favor with him? Su Fan stared at Yang Yi while resentment filled his eyes. You want revenge? Yang Yi smiled and started walking slowly in Su Fan's direction. Everyone here was shocked, and they wondered if the man before them planned to kill Su Fan. Suddenly, a middle-aged man appeared before Yang Yi. The outer court disciples hurriedly bowed respectfully when they saw him. Elder Kong Ming, one of the outer court elders, and his job was to manage the outer court disciples. Kong Ming gazed at Yang Yi for a long time and said, Was it necessary to injure him this severely? Yang Yi said, He's the one who came looking for trouble. Kong Ming spoke coldly. So you destroyed his body and want to kill him? Yang Yi replied, Do you see his eyes? He will definitely seek revenge. If I don't kill him now, he'll stab me in the back another time. Don't you think so too? Kong Ming gazed coldly at Yang Yi. You're all in the same sect, yet you don't give any consideration to that. You're not suited for my outer court. Do you understand what I mean? Yu Qingwu's expression changed when she heard this. Kong Ming was planning on expelling Yang Yi. The other outer court disciples heaved sighs of relief. They felt it was best if someone like Yang Yi was kicked out. Yang Yi chuckled. All right, since I'm not suited to be here, I'll go to the inner court. That works, right? Kong Ming's eyes narrowed slightly. You think you're very strong? Yang Yi shook his head. Elder Kong Ming, you must realize that I didn't cause trouble here. It's he who caused trouble. I was just defending myself. That isn't wrong, isn't it? Kong Ming laughed coldly. You destroyed his body and wanted to kill him, yet you say your actions aren't wrong? You're amazing. I'm an outer court elder, and I announce now that you, Yi Yang, are not a disciple of the ancient sword sect anymore. If you're still here in an hour from now, I'll kill you myself. Yang Yi shrugged and gazed at Yu Qingwu. Where's the inner court's test? She hesitated for a moment and replied, At inner court peak. She pointed into the distance while she spoke. Yang Yi nodded. Thank you. Once he finished speaking, Yang Yi walked off in that direction. The other disciples were stunned by this. Is he that audacious? He doesn't even fear an outer court elder? Kong Ming's face was extremely gloomy. Suddenly, he clawed at Yang Yi from afar, causing the space around Yang Yi to warp. The four-world realm. Kong Ming was at the four-world realm. Yang Ye's eyes narrowed slightly. He was on the verge of being unable to restrain his temper. Right when he was about to counterattack, a voice resounded. Let him come! Kong Ming frowned. but he withdrew his attack a moment later. Yang Yi glanced at Kong Ming and walked off. Kong Ming fell silent on the spot for a long time, and then he followed Yang Yi. The others here did the same. Inner Court Peak. Yang Yi arrived at the test area to become an Inner Court disciple, and he was greeted by a white-haired old man who was a 5-world realm expert. However, the old man was quite old, and his face was covered in wrinkles. Actually, it wasn't difficult for experts at this level to alter their appearances. However, it depended on the person's preference. Some preferred to let nature take its course, and some preferred to stay young. Behind Yang Yi was Kong Ming and numerous disciples from the outer court. Yu Qingguo and Mo Yu were there too. The white-haired old man glanced at Yang Yi. Since you dared to act so fearlessly and showed no fear toward an outer court elder, there are only 2 possibilities. Your backing is formidable, or you're formidable. Of course, it may be both. Yang Yi spoke in a low voice. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, senior. The old man shook his head. You have this chance, but if you fail to pass the test, then I'll destroy your body myself, and then I'll let the outer court elders deal with you. Yang Yi asked, what if I pass it? The old man glanced at him. Then you'll be a disciple of the inner court, and outer court elders can't interfere in your business. Kong Ming's face was quite unsightly. Yang Yi smiled. Then let's begin. The old man replied indifferently. It's a very simple test. To be an inner court disciple, you must be at the limit breaker realm. Of course, if you're not at the limit breaker realm, possessing such strength in advance will make you even more welcome here in the inner court. As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and a huge cage appeared in the space around Yang Yi. The cage was made of unknown black metal, but it was ethereal, so the people outside could still see what was happening within it. Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings and was quite puzzled. Suddenly, a powerful aura appeared before him, and then a huge demon beast arrived in front of him. The demon beast was shaped like a wolf, completely dark violet, with a head like a lion and extremely long fangs that could touch the ground. The demon beast's eyes were filled with a ferocious glow and viciousness. Someone outside the cage exclaimed, "It's a 2-world realm demon beast, a primal lion wolf." The 2-world realm. At this moment, the other outer court disciples started to pity Yang Yi a little. After all, a demon beast's strength far surpassed a human in the same realm of cultivation. Of course, they took even more pleasure in Yang Yi's misfortune. In the cage, the old man glanced at Yang Yi. Do you have a problem with this? Yang Yi nodded. Of course he did. He was in quite a dilemma. How should he deal with this demon beast? Smash it down with a single punch? No, that would be too shocking for everyone here. Draw out the battle until it ended with them being equally matched? But he didn't want to waste too much time. It was difficult. Truly a dilemma. Suddenly, the primal lion wolf charged at him. Yang Yi was about to attack when Sword Scroll's voice resounded in his mind. Act. You must put on an act. Yang Yi was stunned speechless. Put on an act. Yang Yi had no choice this time, because if he defeated the 2-world realm demon beast with ease, it would be really unusual. Extremely unusual. At this moment, the primal lion wolf had arrived before him. Yang Yi clenched his right fist and slammed it forward. He only used 30% of his strength. It slammed straight against the primal lion wolf's head. Bam! The lion wolf was blasted backward. And at practically the exact same moment, Sword Scroll's voice resounded in Yang Yi's mind. Retreat! Yang Yi reacted very quickly. He tapped his right foot against the ground and shot backward like a cannonball. He flew all the way to the cage's wall before stopping himself. Kong Ming and the others outside the cage smiled coldly from the sight of this, but it didn't take long for their smiles to freeze. It was because Yang Yi had crawled up to his feet again. He was on his feet again. They were stunned. A body cultivator. Kong Ming stared at Yang Yi. He hadn't expected Yang Yi to be a body cultivator. No one had expected it. After all, body cultivators were rare in every world, because human bodies were innately weak. Unless it was someone blessed naturally by the heavens, very few would ever cultivate the body. It was too painful and difficult. Yet now they had encountered someone like that. Yang Yi crawled up from the ground and clenched his fists. His gaze was extremely vigilant, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. The lion wolf glanced at Yang Yi. Its instinct told it that this man before it was very dangerous, but it was doubtful when it saw Yang Yi's face. What danger would a human like Yang Yi pose? He was just a body cultivator. So the lion wolf charged at Yang Yi again. It was very fast, and it was extremely strong too. Space rippled in its wake. Yang Yi gritted his teeth and acted like he was resolved to die in this collision, and it didn't take long for him to charge at the lion wolf too. Just like that, Yang Yi and the lion wolf collided once more. Bang! They split apart again. Yang Yi was blasted away and slammed against the cage, causing it to shake. As for the lion wolf, it was pushed back repeatedly and slammed against the cage too. Powerful. The lion wolf was quite vigilant at this point. It looked up at Yang Yi, and it saw Yang Yi twitching incessantly on the ground as if he was enduring terrible pain. The lion wolf was stunned and wondered if it had killed Yang Yi. Suddenly, Yang Yi crawled up slowly to his feet. It seemed like he couldn't even walk steadily at this point, and he almost tripped and fell again. The lion wolf glanced at Yang Yi and charged at him once more. This time, it charged faster and with more force behind it. The others shook their heads from the sight of this and couldn't bear to watch. As far as they were concerned, Yang Yi would be turned to mush now. Bang! An explosion resounded, and the lion wolf was blasted away. Of course, Yang Yi was blasted away first, and he slammed against the cage, almost blasting it into bits. Yang Yi laid there on the ground as his body trembled even more violently than before. The lion wolf didn't feel very well either. Force went in both ways, so when it collided against Yang Yi with such force, the force of collision was something that even it couldn't endure repeatedly. Moreover, others may not realize it, but it knew very well that the young man on the ground over there possessed extremely powerful strength. Moreover, it had a feeling like the young man was holding back. Was it a misconception? Yang Yi crawled up shakily, and then he almost fell again once he got on his feet. He'd stood up again. Everyone had a weird expression on their faces. He was on his feet again. It was the same for the lion wolf. He can still stand? But he must be almost spent. The lion wolf didn't allow its thoughts to wander and just charged at Yang Yi once more. This time, it used its full strength and was determined to blast Yang Yi into mush. Yang Yi gritted his teeth and seemed resolved to die as he leaped up and charged as well. Just like that, they collided once more. Boom! An explosion resounded throughout the cage, and it shook violently. When everything calmed down, Yang Yi was on the ground, and so was the primal lion wolf. The spectators were stunned speechless. It didn't take long for the lion wolf to get back on its feet. If one looked carefully, one would notice that its body had cracked open. As for Yang Yi, his body was trembling incessantly, as if he wouldn't be able to hold on any longer. Not long after the primal demon got back on its feet, Yang Yi did the same. The lion wolf was utterly stunned by this. He can still get up? It had used its full strength earlier. As far as it was concerned, it could crush that human to death with absolute ease, because the human was on the verge of exhaustion. However, the cruel fact before him was that the human had got up again. Again. The primal lion wolf was furious. Its ferocity had been aroused. The lion wolf's eyes were filled with ferocity and viciousness, and it only took a moment for it to charge at Yang Yi again. At this moment, everyone could sense its rage and viciousness. Yang Yi took a deep breath, and then his face strained. It was like he was using all his strength as he quickly charged forward. Just like that, they collided once more. Boom! A wave of powerful energy erupted within the cage, causing cracks to appear throughout the cage. This time, they didn't split apart but were locked in combat instead. Yes, the man and beast were fighting at close quarters. A melee battle, fist against claw. The spectators were dumbstruck. A human at the True Void Realm was fighting a melee battle against a two-world realm demon beast. In the Primordial Pagoda, the dragon and the other demons exchanged glances as they wondered what Yang Yi was doing. After all, they knew Yang Yi's strength very well. Logically speaking, a demon like that would only take a single punch from him. But he seemed like he wasn't really a match for it right now. The man and demon were still fighting outside the pagoda. A long time passed before Xianxia asked, "Sword Scroll, can I stop acting?" A short while later, she spoke solemnly. "No, you must barely win or the higher-ups of the ancient sword sect will become suspicious." Barely win. Xianxia shook his head. Felt so troublesome to him. However, for the sake of Sword Scroll's main body, he had no other choice. Just like that, man and beast fought for almost an hour before they finally stopped. Xianxia laid there on the ground while the lion wolf did the same. They were exhausted. It was truly exhausted this time. It had used all its strength. But that seemingly exhausted human refused to go down. He just wouldn't go down. Even if he did fall to the ground, he would climb back up again. Just like this very moment, the human was ceaselessly trembling on the ground as if he couldn't stand up again. However, it knew very well that so long as it charged over, the human would climb back up and fight it. It didn't want to fight anymore. As if he could sense the lion wolf's feelings, the white-haired old man outside the cage spoke abruptly. "That's enough. That's enough." Did he get in? Or did he fail? Everyone gazed at the old man. The old man waved his hand, and Xianxia was left behind while everyone else was made to leave. The outer court elder, Kong Ming, hesitated for a moment and walked over to the old man. "Elder Su, he's heartless and doesn't care about his fellow disciples at all. He'll bring calamity to us if he's allowed to stay." The old man glanced at Xianxia and said, "He's a good piece of metal. If we temper him well, he may become a pretty good genius for our sect, and a few dozen years later, he may become a central pillar of our sect." Kong Ming thought for a moment and said, "As you say, Elder Su." Elder Su nodded slightly. "Don't think too much about it. People with strength and talent usually have a temper, and the young having a temper is pretty normal. Don't worry, I'll make him change once he enters the inner court. After all, none of the geniuses in the inner court have a good temper." Kong Ming nodded and left. The other disciples naturally didn't dare to stay and left too. Elder Su walked over to Xianxia and asked, "Are you still going to keep your act up?" Xianxia remained there motionlessly. Elder Su spoke indifferently. "Do you want me to help you loosen up?" Xianxia knew that he couldn't continue the act. He stood up and smiled embarrassedly. "Sorry, Elder Su." The old man glanced at him and spoke indifferently. "The Limit Breaker realm?" Xianxia stopped concealing it and restored his cultivation. The old man asked, "Your body too?" Xianxia nodded. Elder Su nodded slightly. "How rare. Tell me, why have you come to my sect?" Xianxia thought for a moment and said, "I want to learn the ancient sword sect's best mental cultivation techniques and sword techniques, like the ancient sword scroll and heavenly sword scripture." The heavenly sword scripture had been written by Sword Scroll too. It was a powerful sword technique which wasn't very useful to him. He only mentioned it so he could gain Elder Su's trust. Elder Su's eyes narrowed slightly. Few are aware of the ancient sword scroll, and very few know of the heavenly sword scripture. Xianxia spoke solemnly. "I really want to learn them." Elder Su asked, "Are you from the South Region's Yi clan?" Xianxia thought for a moment and replied, "Yes, but I'm just an illegitimate child from a branch family. In short, there's no link between us, and they don't know about me." An illegitimate child. Elder Su frowned slightly. How did an illegitimate child attain such accomplishments? Xianxia hesitated for a moment. Senior, can't I obtain some fortuitous encounters? You're just asking because you're afraid I have malicious intentions. But senior, just think about it, what can I possibly do? My goal is simple, it's the ancient sword scroll and heavenly sword scripture. If you refuse to let me learn it, I'll just leave. Elder Su gazed at Xianxia for a long time and said, "You're very frank. As for those techniques, if you have the ability, you can learn them all. You're an inner court disciple of my ancient sword sect now.